Hello, my lovelies. Today we're reading Flutterby. It's book 5 in the Serendipity series, written by Stephen Cosgrove and illustrated by Robin James. Beyond the horizon, in the middle of the crystal sea, was the magical island of Serendipity. It was here, in a burst of starlight and moonbeams, that a tiny winged horse called Flutterby was born. As her silver-blue cocoon shimmered in the starlight, she unfurled her wings and whinnied at the full moon in the sky. She looked about, and with a twinkle in her eye, she lifted into the sky to learn all she could learn about her new world. Most importantly, she wished to discover what she was and what she was supposed to do. The dawn of a new morning warmed her wings as she soared just as high as she could fly. She looked about and whispered, "I wonder what I am. I wonder what I'm supposed to do." Flutterby fluttered about for an hour or more as her wings grew stronger and stronger. All the while she wondered about her place on the island of Serendipity. She was still deep in thought when she spied an army of ants working industriously far below. "Maybe, just maybe, that's what I must be. I am an ant," she exclaimed. With that, Flutterby the ant glided to the ground to join what she thought were her own kind. For the most part, the ants simply ignored Flutterby as she landed amongst them. Still and all, she watched with interest as they busily dashed about, gathering food and carrying it to the anthill. "Well," she whinnied enthusiastically, "if I am truly an ant, then maybe I need to get to work." She picked up a packet of pollen and then, like the other ants, carried it to the hill. She started to back down into the anthill when she realized that she didn't quite fit through the opening. She was stuck halfway in and halfway out. She began to whinny in fear, but the patient ants, with some of them pushing from inside and the others pulling from the outside, yanked her from the anthill like a cork popping out of a bottle. Flutterby was very upset. "If I'm an ant, then why don't I fit in our home?" "Silly creature," scolded one of the ants. "You're not one of us." "But then what am I?" she asked. "Maybe you're a honeybee," they laughed. And with that they went back to work, chuckling and shaking their heads. "Maybe the ants are right," she said as a tear dropped from her eye. "Maybe I am not an ant. Maybe I must be a honeybee." So Flutterby the busy bee flew just as high as she could fly and looked about the sky. It didn't take long until she spied a swarm of honeybees buzzing about the bright yellow flowers in the meadow. The bees flew from blossom to blossom, collecting nectar to be made into honey. I'm a bee," she exclaimed with glee. Quickly she folded her wings and, like a hawk, swept to the ground. Carefully she watched the bees' every movement. Then, doing exactly as they had done, she carefully stuck her head into a blossom and sipped a mouthful of the sweet flower nectar. Her mouth full of nectar and her legs coated in pollen, she flew in line with the other honeybees that were heading for the hive. Imitating the bees, she carefully spit the nectar into the hive. "That was easy," she laughed. "I guess I really am a bee." Contented, she decided to explore her new home. Everything would have been just dandy except that she backed into a fellow bee. Now, it must be said that the bee never really meant to sting the tiny winged horse, but sting it did. With a flick of her tail and a high-pitched whinny, Flutterby jumped straight into the air and landed right in the middle of a honeycomb. The bees buzzed about, laughing at the poor little horse as she sat stuck in the hive. "Why are you laughing?" she wailed. "I am just a bee that's been stung." "Silly creature," they laughed. "You're not a honeybee." "What?" she cried as a honey-coated tear dripped from her eye. "But then what am I?" "We don't know," they said as they pulled her from the hive. "Maybe you're a butterfly." With that, they sent her on her way. Flutterby the butterfly flew just as high as she could fly. As she looked about the sky for some other butterflies, the honey melted from her hooves and dropped like a golden rain. She fluttered here, she fluttered there, she fluttered everywhere. Finally, below, she spied hundreds of beautiful butterflies softly gliding on a soft breeze around an old elm tree. Hoping that these surely must be her people, she swooped down with a kick and a giggle to join her own kind. She landed on a broad branch and watched her fellow butterflies float gently by. Ah, she thought, these are my kind. I have wings. I like to fly. Surely I am a butterfly. She spread her wings, stepped from the branch, trying to float on a whisper of wind. Sadly, Flutterby was not a butterfly, nor did she have their wings. She floated like a rock, and that isn't like floating at all. Down through the branches she fell, landing on a big, flat leaf. Flutterby sat there and cried and cried. She would have been there to this very day, save for an old butterfly that happened by. "Why are you crying?" he asked. "I don't know what I am," sobbed Flutterby. "When I came from my cocoon, I flew just as high as I could fly, and I spied the ants, but they told me I wasn't an ant. So I flew just as high as I could fly, and I spied the bees, but they laughed at me and told me I wasn't a bee. Then, just now, I flew just as high as I could fly, and I spied the butterflies. I tried to float like a butterfly, but I fell, so obviously I am not like you at all. I just don't know what I am." The old butterfly smiled. "Look down, little Flutterby. Tell me what you see." Very carefully, the tiny winged horse leaned over the leaf and looked far below. "I see a pool of water," she said. "And," said the butterfly, "look again and tell me what else you see." "I see a tiny horse with wings upon its back," said Flutterby. Then she became very excited. "Why, that's me, I see." After looking at herself for a moment, she asked, "But what am I?" The old butterfly began to lift higher on the breeze. "You are what you are, just as I am me. You are you, nothing more, nothing less." "But what does a me do?" she called out. Thought the butterfly. "Well, you can fly higher than high, you can whinny as loud as the wind, and can see for miles. I know that you can do, and do better than the best of the butterflies or the bees. Fly as high as you can fly, and watch for the approach of the silvery frost. When you see the frost glistening on the meadows, you must warn us all. For the butterflies, the ants, and the bees must hide from the winter, and you can be their alarm." Flutterby was so happy that she had found herself and something to do that she loved to do, flying just as high as she could fly. So on some autumn morning, look into a frosty pool, and you'll see in the reflection that you're a butterfly too. What a great story. Remember, the most important thing you can do is just be who you are. I love you guys. Bye.